Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Josh Henning live, the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. Matt Black Kia, they want to get you approved today. Matt Black Kia, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Well, we've been previewing all the divisions here on the Sports Batch, and Mike Yell is off today. Josh Henning filling in for him, and we are finally at the NFC East. We've gotten through every division. We've left the best for last. And joining us as he does each and every Friday here on a Happy Hour Friday, it is Andrew DiCecco joining us as we are getting into the NFC East. The Birds are a mystery. The Giants, a lot of questions. The Cowboys, they're on Hard Knocks. And then the Washington football team, will Fitzmagic live? We'll get into all that and more right now with Andrew DiCecco here on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, happy Friday. How you doing?
Hey, Josh. How's it going?
It's going all right. Just another day in paradise, and it feels like football. I'm getting more and more anxious for football to get here because I'm starting to get the itch. You know what I mean? I feel like, it's getting to a point where it's becoming more pronounced. Like, football season between the draft and training camp, you always have those longing feelings, but it feels like the anticipation of training camp is really ramping up for me, at least.
Right.
So let's get into some of these teams. I want to start with the team that won the division last year, which is Washington. And they still have a great defense. But the question is on the offensive side of the ball. Most people believe that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be the leading candidate. But it seems like Washington is at least putting out to the media that it's a competition between him and Heineke. I'm assuming that if Fitzpatrick is the Fitzpatrick we know, he would win that competition. So what does Ryan Fitzpatrick bring to the Washington offense they didn't have last year, Andrew?
Well, he brings a veteran pedigree. He's usually the type of player that once he arrives at a team and within the first year he makes an impact. Then usually it's his tendencies start to catch up to him. Teams catch up to him, and he usually falls out of favor and moves on to the next team. He's been on a number of different teams, but he usually goes to the team and it usually ignites them, provides a spark, has that veteran presence, knows how to get everybody involved, which I really like because they have a lot of offensive weapons to use at his disposal. So I think that he's going to win that job pretty handedly. I think that they're going to sort of advertise it as being a quarterback competition, but let's not kid ourselves. It's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick week 1.
Now, we know they added Curtis Samuel to an offense that already has about but it feels like every other player on the offensive side of the ball has flexibility. Guys like Antonio Gibson, guys like they had J.D. McKissick last year, Terry McLaurin's obviously a threat. So what do you think Washington's offense is going to be able to do this year with all those versatile weapons?
Well, I think they're going to do a lot of great things this year. And I'm going to tell you why, because their receiving core is one of the deepest in the NFC East, and probably is the deepest in the NFC East. You have Terry McLaurin. You mentioned everything that he can do. He can affect all three levels of the field. You have Kelvin Harmon there. Curtis Samuel came over from Carolina. Curtis Samuel is more of that gadget type of player, explosive, get him on the move. He can be a dynamic threat out of the slot. And you have, let's not forget, they drafted Diami Brown, the wide receiver from North Carolina, who was an explosive vertical threat. They took him in the 3rd round, a player who many Eagles fans, I'm sure, would have liked to have seen become a Philadelphia Eagle. He went, I believe, pick number 82. They also have Antonio Gandy Golden, who is still a big body, but he's a raw player, and he should be able to factor in the red zone this year. He was a 4th-round pick in 2020 out of Liberty. They also have Isaiah Wright, who was a college free agent last season from Temple, right in our backyard, or my backyard, I should say. And he's another guy he's a big, strong, quick receiver, contested catch specialist, made the team as an undrafted free agent last year. Really liked what I saw from him, dominated the Shrine Bowl. Then Steven Sims, he's a little bit further down the depth chart now. I thought he was going to be someone who was going to be an explosive, emerging slot receiver, but he really fell out of favor, never really lived up to expectations. And let's not forget, there's also a former Eagle in there, I believe, in DeAndre Carter, if he's still there, and he can factor in as a return specialist. So they have a lot of guys there. Then when you look at the tight end position, you have Logan Thomas, who I think is starting to really emerge in the 2nd and 3rd stage of his career. was a former quarterback, of course, at college at West Virginia, and he's just someone who I think is going to be just having that understanding for the quarterback position. He's going to know exactly how to find the openings in zone, be a security blanket for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Their offensive line is decently solid. They added Samuel Cosmi in the second round, Cosmi from Texas. And then I love the running back situation. Antonio Gibson was one of my favorite players in the 2020 draft. He's a former wide receiver turned running back, very limited mileage on the tires there, and just someone who can affect both the passing game and, run the ball between the tackles and bounce it outside and create the home run play there. And J.D. McKissick provides the best of both worlds as a pass-catching specialist, good route runner, very quick and elusive player. So, and they added Jarrett Patterson, a player who I thought was going to be drafted. He went to Buffalo. The kid rushed for about 3,800 yards in 3 years and scored 19 touchdowns last season for the Bulls. So he's another guy that I think could very easily provide some more depth to that running back room.
Yeah, Jarrett Patterson's a stud, and you know what? If you find a way to work him into that offense, Washington can be very good, but the question still is the quarterback. And just flip it over to the one thing we do know, the defense. Washington's defense gave the world champions, Super Bowl champions last year a run for their money in the postseason. They're down Ryan Kerrigan, but I think the addition of Davis through the draft is going to be big for them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about their defensive line. It's just going to be ferocious. You have Chase Young, you have Deron Payne, who I actually think is one of the best defensive tackles in football, maybe the best defensive tackle in football, sort of gets a little overshadowed there with all the talent around him. Jonathan Allen's there, Montez Sweat's there, Matt Ioannidis is there, Tim Settle. So they have a lot of backup support to give those guys a blow up front. Jamin Davis is there at linebacker to sort of invigorate that group and provide some athleticism there. Cole Holcomb's a solid player, not tremendously athletic, but he provides a lot of toughness and tenacity from the outside linebacker spot. Then you move to the secondary. You have William Jackson, who came over from the Cincinnati Bengals, very quick twitch player, not necessarily the get up in your face, press you type of corner, but he can remain in phase, very fluid, both in and out of transition. Cameron Curl is a player who was a 7th-round pick out of Arkansas last year. Really liked what he brought to the table. Sleeper pick. He had about 90 tackles and 3 picks and a touchdown last season. Really burst onto the scene. So I like what he provides as a complement to Landon Collins playing beside him. And Jimmy Moreland, in my opinion, I've been saying this since, a couple years now, he is the most underrated nickel corner in football.
Where does Washington's defense rank compared to the rest of the NFC East in your mind? Not the NFC East, but the NFC in general, because, this is the second year now Jack Del Rio and Ron Navarro have a defense, and historically, the first year Jack Del Rio has a defense, there's a huge progress meter. But the second year, they kind of plateau a little bit. So will this defense plateau? Can they be better than they were last year? How they rank versus the rest of the NFC?
Well, I think you said it there. Continuity. The Jack Del Rio has a history, and that defense has adopted that tough-minded mentality. And you look at the talent that he has there at the pass rush situation, and they now added Davis at linebacker, and they've solidified the back end a little bit more. Last season, let's put it this way: last season, I thought that they had a chance to be one of the best defensive lines in football, and this season, I think that this is where they take the next step and become probably one of the better defenses in the NFC.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. We're breaking down the NFC East, the final division, and our divisional previews today on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco joining us here for Football at 4. Andrew, let's head up the I-95 to the New York Giants. To me, the Giants are a team that I feel like I don't have a ton of answers about because they added all these wide receivers, but to be honest, I still don't know what Daniel Jones is this point. Did the Giants do enough this offseason to put an offense around and in front of Jones to make him successful?
It's strange that with the Giants because for years they had the quarterback and the surrounding talent, but the offensive line was always in shambles. Now they have a lot of young pieces there, and the offensive line looks like it's coming together, and the receiving core is vastly improved, but there's a lot of questions surrounding the quarterback. So I don't know that Daniel Jones has what it takes to become that bona fide, clear-cut top option in the NFL based on where he was drafted. we just have not seen enough in the past 2 seasons. He's a very streaky player. He'll put together some very strong performances, and then he'll be sort of marred by a lot of, gaffes. I mean, just look no further than when he broke open in the open field against the Eagles and just tripped over a blade of grass. These are things that you have to be a little bit more headsy and graceful as a quarterback, and not necessarily the most proficient in his reads. And there's certain blemishes to his game that they just haven't gotten ironed out 2 years in. So we'll see what they can do there. But I love what they've done at the wide receiver position to sort of provide some support to Darius Slayton. Sterling Shepard is a very good slot receiver, but he's banged up constantly. So what they did was they brought in Kenny Golladay from the Lions. He signed a 4-year, $70 million contract. He played in just 5 games last year, but he's been a very dominant player at the peak of his game. So he's going to provide a good complement there. John Ross also comes over from the Bengals. John Ross, the year before, he put together his best season as a pro. I think it was just 500 yards. But, last year he was injured with a foot injury and was only limited to 3 games. So I don't know how much you're going to get out of John Ross. He's an explosive, speedy guy and can add another dimension to that aerial attack. But, that's more of a luxury now. They also added Dante Pettis, who is another vertical player as well. So we'll see what they can do there.
So how do you expect them to line up all those guys? Because you basically just named 5 dudes who all can have an impact in the offense, but you're probably only going to have 3 wide receivers on the field at a time because you already have Evan Ingram out there. Saquon Barkley is coming back. So I'm assuming it would be 3 receivers, Ingram and Barkley out there on their best formation. So who do you think those receivers are going to be in those situations?
Yeah, and let's not forget Kyle Rudolph's there as well. So eventually, I think he's injured, but when he's healthy, I think that you could see some 2 tight end sets. But you're right. Going in the early goings, I think you're going to see 3 wide out sets, and you're going to see probably Darius Slayton, Kenny Golladay, and Sterling Shepard. I would have to think Sterling Shepard's role, his stranglehold on that slot spot is tenuous at best, in my opinion, because of his availability. Because he's not necessarily an explosive player, he has a knack for getting open, good route runner, good short area quickness, but not someone that's a game breaker when you're looking at someone like a John Ross or even a Dante Pettis, who is still a raw player, has not lived up to expectations, but they just bring a little bit more of another dimension to the offense. So, Sterling Shepard's steady, and I think that'll be his job in the early goings.
We know that the Giants try to improve their defense through the draft, but despite that, they lost Tomlinson, I believe, in the offseason to Minnesota. So what is the Giants' defense coming into this year? Because last year, it was like one of those no-name defense of a bunch of guys who were hustling. But to me, losing Tomlinson is a huge loss. I don't really think they filled in for.
No, they really didn't. I think Danny Shelton's there. Danny Shelton is, he's just an average player. They have Dexter Lawrence and they have Leonard Williams is there. But, you're right, replacing a guy like Davin Tomlinson is, that's no small feat, and they don't have the personnel to do so. So there's going to be a little bit of a gaping hole right in the middle of their defensive line, and that I think teams are going to find success running between. And then you look at the linebacker spot, and the linebacker spot to me is just a lot of slow-footed, physical, and they come downhill, but they're not really fluid in space, and I think they can be exposed there in the middle of the field by some of the more dynamic tight ends and pass-catching running backs that they're going to go up against. And there's not a whole lot of promise behind them, so that's going to be a little problematic for them. And then the secondary, James Bradbury is they paid him a lot of money, the Giants did a season ago, but he's still vastly underrated. Jabril Peppers is there. Logan Ryan's there. Darnay Holmes. I mentioned Jimmy Mullen. Well, Darnay Holmes is not far behind as being a dominant nickel player, and I think that he's going to become more of a household name this year. That was, of course, the 4th-round pick out of UCLA who really impressed at the Senior Bowl. So they have some pieces there on the back end to work around.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco is joining us to preview the NFC East today at DiCecco NFL on Twitter. He joins us every Tuesday and Friday on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on a Happy Hour Friday. Andrew, let's go down to the team that I think half the division is going to be sick and tired of by the end of August because they're on Hard Knocks. It is Jerry Jones's Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys are an interesting team because of the fact that Dak Prescott's coming off of injury. They have a new defensive coordinator. there's some changes, there's some differences going on with the Cowboys. So I want to start with defense with you. What does Dan Quinn bring to this team that they didn't have last year in Mike Nolan?
Well, I think there's going to be a little bit more discipline. I think there's going to be more accountability. And I also think there's going to be a lot of scheming towards players' strengths rather than trying to pigeonhole them and force them against, what their skill sets allow them to do, if that makes sense. And, I mean, their defense is stacked. When you look at DeMarcus Lawrence, Tristan Hill is a player who I really liked coming out of the draft out of UCF, the defensive tackle. We'll see if he can sort of turn the corner there and become a player that they envisioned him being. He really has not lived up to his expectations. Gallimore is there from Oklahoma, I believe. You have Randy Gregory, and I love their linebacking situation. You have Micah Parsons and Jalen Smith manning the middle of the field for that defense. They're very versatile players and multifaceted, and they can play the run and they can play the pass. There's not a whole. They can do different things coverage-wise with those guys that a lot of teams don't have the luxury of. The secondary is very young. I like the talent on the back end. You have Reggie Robinson, who they took in the 4th round in 2020. You have Kelvin Joseph, who's a bit of a raw player. I thought that was a reach there in the 2nd round. That was their 2021 pick. Those are the 2 corners in all likelihood. You have Trayvon Diggs. Trayvon Diggs, who they took, my mistake, from Alabama. And I think that, that's right, Reggie Robinson's their free safety. So he's another young player. Trayvon Diggs is their 2nd-round pick in 2020. He's there as well. And then Jordan Lewis is a small, undersized, but very quick and shifty slot corner that sort of matches up with some of the more explosive players that the opposition presents.
Let's flip it over to the offense. Obviously, everyone knows about Prescott. If he's healthy, he's arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Ezekiel Elliott, hopefully, the Cowboy fans are hoping he gets back on track. We know about the 3 wide receivers, Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Gallup. But, Andrew, my question is the offensive line. The offensive line used to be the staple of this team. This isn't the same offensive line they had a few years ago, is it?
No, I mean, how the mighty have fallen, so to speak, and how quickly things change in the NFL. They aren't as bad as you might be led to believe, and I think that it could very well be a strength that certain players sort of step forward and take that next step. And, Tyron Smith is there. Biadasz, the center, was a 4th-round pick in 2020. I think this is going to be a crucial step in his progression this year. I think he's going to really stand out. Zach Martin's there. La'el Collins, let's not forget him. La'el Collins is there as well. So they have a good mix of veteran and young upside there to work with. And the receiving core is very strong. They have the potential to be one of the best offenses in general in the NFL. However, they're not very deep. I mean, I think they have Noah Brown still there, the former Ohio State receiver, and Malik Turner is there as well. But let's talk about the top 3 guys: Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb. All 3 of those guys provide so many different variables and so many different traits that they bring to the forefront, and they can be utilized in many different ways. And I think CeeDee Lamb is really going to become one of the more breakout players of the 2021 season. Then you look at the running back situation. You have Zeke Elliott. You have Tony Pollard, who's more of the pass receiving guy, and Rico Dowdle, who's the between the tackles grinder. So you have Ezekiel Elliott, who can be there's the 3-down workhorse, and then you have the 2 complementary players in Pollard and Dowdle. I really like that offense. It's very well rounded.
Let's jump over to the Eagles. We left them the best for last. The team that has the most, I think, questions because if everything lines up for the Eagles, they can be probably an 8-9 win team, or everything could fall apart again and they could be a 4-5 win team. So let's start with Jalen Hurts. I feel like Jalen Hurts is the most controversial topic in terms of the national pundits, in terms of the Eagles, because either people believe Hurts can be a good starting quarterback, and then there are people who believe that he's just a mobile quarterback who can throw. So where do you stand on Jalen Hurts as the Eagles starting quarterback?
Yeah, it's kind of weird that he's become such a polarizing figure after just a 4-game sample size. I mean, so many people are ready to write Jalen off before he's really had a chance to prove what he can do with a full offseason, with working with his skilled players and the new coaching staff, and how he's going to iron out some of the areas that he needed to improve on. And obviously the turnovers, working through his progressions, and just a lot of maturity progression you want to see from him from year one that he never really had. And remember, he never had a preseason to work with. So I think that there's just a lot of skepticism around him based on what they had to go off of. He turned the football over. He was flashy in spots, but not consistent enough. Doesn't have that prototypical size. He's sometimes just too quick to run out, escape the pocket, and create yards with his legs. He's got to be a little bit more patient, hang in there. And but I think he's going to continue to build continuity with his pass receivers. And you have Dallas Goedert, who I think is going to be, if there's any question last season, he's going to become a top flight tight end in this league. He has that continuity with Devontae Smith. I think Devontae Smith's really going to be that target monster who's going to live over the short to intermediate routes and just be a player that Jalen's going to rely on and go to in critical moments. And then Jalen Reagor, I don't know that he's going to be a volume guy, but I think that he's going to take a step forward and rebound from that rough rookie season, and he's going to be that vertical guy and someone who I hope the coaching staff utilizes in the way that his skill set is meant to be utilized, and get him on the move, get him in space, let him take the ball out of the backfield and manufacture yards that way. Just get him involved in the game early, and so to kind of build his confidence, because every player is wired differently, and I think that he has the skill set. It's just a matter of using him the right way. And Travis Fulgham is going to be the third option at receiver. He's going to be the red zone guy, the guy who's going to come up with those contested catches and things like that. So I like what they have there at receiver. They're young and they are inexperienced, but they all bring something different to the table.
Andrew, my biggest question on the defense isn't specifically about the players, and I feel like the cornerback situation will figure itself out eventually. My question is Jonathan Gannon, because we have no idea what this is going to look like, because with Jim Schwartz, you knew what Jim Schwartz's defenses were. You knew who Billy Davis was, at least prospectively from other teams, right? We knew who the past guys who were defense coordinators were here. But Gannon, this is his first D coordinator job. There's a lot of speculation about what exactly this defense is going to look like, and that fascinates me.
Yeah, it's going to be the great mystery, but we'll start to find things out here in the coming weeks as training camp gets underway on Tuesday.
What is your expectation for this Eagles defense this year, considering the changes that have been made, though, on personnel?
I think that their defensive line is going to be strong, but that's historically been a pillar of any Eagles defense, really. Their linebacker situation still has question marks. I mean, you have Alex Singleton, who really broke out seemingly out of nowhere, but he's going to need a strong running mate, and I think that's going to be Eric Wilson, who came over from the Vikings. Eric Wilson he's just a guy. He is what he is. He had one breakout season. He's been a backup rotational player, special teams guy, but he does have a lot of speed and coverage acumen to bring to the table, so I think he will complement the tough downhill approach of Alex Singleton. And Alex Singleton really sort of developed as the season went on as a coverage linebacker. So TJ Edwards is also there. TJ Edwards will be also in the running to be a potential starter, but I think it's going to go to Singleton and Eric Wilson. TJ Edwards is more of a one-dimensional linebacker that I think is best utilized situationally. So that's how I kind of envision that. And then on the back end has a lot of question marks, as we all know, as I've written about, as we've outlined on the show. You have Avonte Maddox, who right now he's written in pencil as the corner opposite Darius Slay. They don't have a ton of options outside of Maddox. I mean, you have Craig James, you have Zach McPherson, who's a rookie. I don't know how willing they're going to be to throw a rookie out there to the Wolves. You want to let him develop. Playing NFL corner is not the same as transitioning to the defensive line or being a running back or something like that. You have to sort of be brought along gradually, and I think that's how they're going to approach that. So then the other options are Kevon Seymour, Graylin Arnold, Josiah Scott, Michael Jacquet. I mean, I just cannot envision the Eagles going into the season with one of those guys opposite Slay. So I do anticipate a late season trade, much like we saw in 2017 when they acquired Ronald Darby from the Bills.
At your NFC East preview, Andrew DiCecco will be back this coming Tuesday for football at 4. here on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff Mosher on Monday, DiCecco on Tuesday. Next week, as the Eagles are just days away from reporting the training camp. And he joined us here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew, great breakdown today. Really enjoyed it. Enjoy the weekend, my friend.
You too, Josh. Take care, man.